Every single day, whether you realize it or not, you are constantly managing risk. It's in everything from crossing the street to investing your savings. But what if you could do more than just hope for the best? Today, we're going to break down how to turn all that uncertainty from something that gives you anxiety into your greatest strategic advantage. So, let's get right into it.
Everything, and I mean everything, that we're about to talk about starts with this one simple question. What could go wrong? I know, it sounds almost too basic, right? But believe me, this is probably the single most powerful question in strategy, in planning, and honestly, in just getting through your day successfully.
And once you start looking for it, you see it everywhere. An engineer who's building a bridge, they're constantly asking it. A surgeon right before an operation, you bet they're asking it. A project manager who's just trying to hit a deadline, they pretty much live and breathe this question. It's the universal starting line for dealing with a future you can't predict.
Okay, so let's get a little more formal for a second. When we say risk, what we're really talking about is an uncertain event. But here's the part that almost everyone misses. A risk can have a positive or a negative effect. Yeah, we're all wired to think of risk as just bad news. But sometimes a risk is actually an unexpected opportunity in disguise. The only thing that's guaranteed is the uncertainty.
So, how do you actually get good at this stuff? Well, it's not about filling out a bunch of forms or sitting in endless, boring meetings. It's about developing a totally different way of thinking, a proactive mindset that lets you kind of peek into the future and see what might be coming before anyone else does.
We can boil this entire complex world down into two really core ideas. First, you have to find the risks. That's risk identification. And second, you have to figure out what in the world you're going to do about them. And that's risk mitigation. It's pretty simple, really. See it, then solve it. Let's kick things off with how you see.
And that brings us to the first phase, risk identification. I want you to think of this section as your detective's toolkit. Right now, we're on the hunt for clues, we're gathering evidence, and we're trying to build a solid case for what might be lurking just around the corner.
So, where do we find these clues? Well, a great place to start is with what are called qualitative techniques. Basically, methods that lean on human smarts and experience. This can be something as simple as a good old-fashioned brainstorming session. Or maybe you use a SWOT analysis, where you systematically list out your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. There's even this really cool method called the Delphi technique. You anonymously survey a bunch of experts, then you share the group's answers and survey them again, and you keep doing that until everyone starts to agree. It's a super clever way to get honest answers without anyone feeling pressured.
But here's the thing, there's no single magic bullet for finding risks. Brainstorming, for instance, is fantastic for creative, out-of-the-box thinking, but you might totally miss the more subtle, boring risks. On the other hand, a simple checklist is great for making sure you cover all the known problems, but it's not going to help you one bit when something completely new and unexpected pops up. The real power, you see, is in mixing and matching these approaches.
Now here is a really powerful tool for digging deeper. It's called the 5 Whys method. Instead of just slapping a Band-Aid on a problem, you ask why it happened over and over again. Like, imagine a product has defects. Okay, why? Well, the quality check failed. Why? Because the machine wasn't calibrated right. Why? Routine maintenance was skipped. See? By the time you get to that 5th why, you're not just treating a symptom anymore. You've found the actual root of the problem.
Okay, so you've put on your detective hat and you've identified all the potential risks. What now? Well, this is where we get into the mitigation playbook. You're going to shift from being a risk analyst to being a risk strategist. It's time to make some moves.
You've got 4 main plays in your book, often called the 4 T's. The very first and most direct is to terminate the risk. This is basically the nope, not even going to go there option. You just change your plan completely to avoid the risk altogether. A perfect example of this is deciding to cancel a big investment because the market is just way too unpredictable. You're not trying to tough it out. You're just deciding not to sail into the storm in the first place. Simple. You've terminated that risk.
Your second strategy is to treat the risk, and that really just means reducing it. You're accepting that you can't get rid of it completely, but you can take real, concrete steps to make it less likely to happen, or at least less damaging if it does. This is probably the one you'll see used the most often.
Just think about a construction site. You can never, ever get rid of the risk of human error 100%. It's just not possible. But you can absolutely treat that risk by requiring safety workshops and providing better training. You're actively lowering the odds of an accident.
Third on our list is to transfer the risk. This one is exactly what it sounds like. You make the risk someone else's problem. You're usually shifting the financial consequences over to somebody else.
And honestly, we do this all the time. Insurance is the most obvious example, right? If something happens to your house, the financial risk is transferred to the insurance company. Or think about a company that outsources its IT security. It's paying another firm to take on the massive risk of getting hacked.
And the final play you have is to tolerate the risk, which means to simply accept it. Now, this is really important. This does not mean ignoring the risk. It's about making a conscious, strategic decision that the cost of fighting the risk is actually way higher than the potential damage it could cause.
For instance, a huge company might decide to tolerate the risk of a minor one-day shipping delay. Trying to build a system that is so perfect that it prevents any delay ever would cost a fortune. So instead, they just accept it might happen, and they keep a little extra cash or inventory on hand just in case. It's a smart trade-off. Now, all these strategies make a lot of sense in theory, but what happens when they get put to the test in the real world? Or worse, when they're ignored? Well, the stakes can be astronomical. Let's look at two really powerful examples that show just how high.
On one hand, you have the Bhopal gas tragedy in 1984, a truly catastrophic failure where basic safety checks were reportedly ignored, and it led to an absolutely horrific, preventable disaster. Then, on the other hand, think about the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Many governments used proactive scenario planning, a key identification tool, to model how the virus could spread and what it would do to the economy. This allowed them to roll out mitigation strategies. It is such a stark contrast, with literal life-and-death consequences.
So this all brings us to the real takeaway. The tools, the techniques, they're all super important, but they are totally useless if you don't have the right culture. Truly mastering risk means building that proactive mindset right into the DNA of your team, your company, or even just how you operate in your own life.
So, what does a culture like that actually look like? Well, it means creating a space where anyone feels safe enough to raise their hand and say, hey, what could go wrong here? It means making risk analysis just a normal part of making any decision, not just some box you have to check at the very end. And most importantly, it means never, ever getting complacent. You have to constantly be scanning the horizon because new risks are always showing up. So let's be crystal clear about the goal here. This is not about trying to create some fantasy world where there's zero risk. That's just impossible. The real goal is to face uncertainty head-on, to understand it, and then use that understanding to make smarter, more resilient decisions. This whole process, it's about empowerment, not about fear.
And that brings it all right back to you. After everything we've talked about today, from spotting risks to deciding how to handle them, I just want to leave you with one final question to think about. What is one risk in your work or in your life, big or small, that you can start planning for today?